Planning ahead is always a good idea, but the truth is mistakes and unexpected insights are often the sources of important advances. That is the focus of a new book, How We Got to Now, 6 Innovations That Made the Modern World. The author, Stephen Johnson, and host of the new PBS series of the same name, is here with us this morning. Stephen, good morning.
Good morning.
This book is so interesting because you basically start with a single innovation, and then we watch as you sort of hopscotch through history. How did you pick the 6 innovations where you start in this book?
Well, what we wanted to have in the book, and each episode is the same way, is to have something that we don't think about anymore as technology or as an innovation. That we're so used to it that it's just part of our everyday life. So like a glass of clean drinking water, for instance, or air conditioning, right?
Yep.
We don't think of that as technology. But there's a whole vast history of ingenuity and craziness that led to that innovation being part of our lives.
Well, let's look at one place you start, which is train travel and what that led to. Take us on that.
Well, this is in the chapter on time and on clocks. And what people don't realize is until about 1870 in the United States, every town was on its own unique kind of time zone. So you'd be in New York City, and it would be 8:15, and in New Haven, it would be 8:22, and in Boston, it would be like 8:13. Mm-hmm. And this was a problem that nobody noticed because you didn't have to coordinate your schedules and you didn't have to call anybody, at exactly the same time. And then railroads came along,
right.
And suddenly people were completely confused about what time it was. And they would go from one place to another, and they traveled for 30 minutes, and it would be 45 minutes later. Except the railroad that they were on was actually on Baltimore time, and so they were catching a train that was on a completely different time. So it was a mess. And so we had to invent standardized time zones, which solved this problem that hadn't even been a problem before. And that made, in the next century, national media possible. You can only say tune in at 8:15 Eastern Standard Time because we have standard times.
Let's talk about another one of the hopscotches you make, and that's light. You basically say it was a journalist who changed the face of urban poverty. How do you get there?
Well, there's a famous kind of muckraker at the end of the 19th century, Jacob Riis, who was very much involved in kind of championing the plight of the urban poor, but he was having a hard time getting people excited about this cause. And part of the problem was that he wanted to take pictures of them and show what life was like in slums like 5 Points here in New York. And it was simply too dark to photograph these conditions. We didn't have flash photography at that point. But he gets word about this German invention. It's called Blitzlicht. We actually recreated it in the show. It's like setting off a small explosion, basically. Mm-hmm. And he goes off and storms into people's houses in these tiny little, slum apartments, and basically sets off small explosions in their room, but he captures these photographs for the first time. And he puts it into a book famously called How the Other Half Lives. Mm-hmm. Goes on a kind of magic lantern tour all around the country. And that is the beginning, in many ways, of the progressive movement. But it was made possible by flash photography.
You also make a connection from refrigeration to Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
How does that work?
That's one of my favorite. Well, air conditioning, really. So air conditioning starts in Brooklyn.
Yep.
There's a printing shop where the ink is running during the humid months of the summer. And so they hire a guy to come in and solve this problem, to dehumidify the printing shop. And he invents this technology that also makes the air cool, almost by accident. And so everybody in the printing shop is like, I'm going to have my lunch in there. It's really nice.
Right.
So
I've got 20 seconds. So
50 years later, air conditioning goes mainstream. Everybody moves to the Sun Belt. Massive swing in the Electoral College because air conditioning has moved all these people there, and that's central to Ronald Reagan's electoral strategy.
Fascinating. All right, it's an amazing book. How We Got to Now. The author is Stephen Johnson. Thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure.